The number one question I got to ask you, which is related to that video, is about West Point Gray Academy. And I'm sure said that there's a $2.5 million settlement put out, and that settlement was given to a wealthy businessman's daughter to suppress this. And it seems to be the case that there, in 1999, there was an inappropriate relationship with a 14-year-old girl. In researching you, I've listened to like 8 hours of podcasts. I feel like I've already been talking to you. And in doing so, I was also going through your Twitter and whatnot. And I actually wasn't, there's so many things happening in Canada. It's kind of hard to keep track of at any given time, especially given with prorogation and et cetera, et cetera. But I actually saw you had reposted, I'll screen share here. It's actually something I wanted to start with too. I don't know if you can see this. Did it come up for you?
Uh-huh.
Right, so this was Right Blend. I guess he got on the phone or whatever it might have been with Pat, and I actually hadn't seen this until a couple days ago. And it really actually, I'm sure you've read this through because you had reposted it, but this absolutely broke my heart, actually. This is probably one of the worst things I've ever read. It actually made me lose what little confidence I had left in the country as a whole, the contents of this message. And so if it's actually all right with you, I wouldn't mind kind of going through it.
Sure.
This only actually has 150,000 views, which is wild that this only has 150,000 views.
And of those 150,000 views, how many people actually spend the time to truly kind of go through it all? But
and
story of Pat King is and frankly of all the the Canadian Freedom Convoy participants and leaders and proponents, and Pat King specifically. I mean, he has a large voice and he's not afraid to use it. And it seems like he's been subject to to just extraordinarily unfair treatment and unjust treatment, to the point where as of tomorrow is the sentencing, and they're talking about trying to give him 10 years is what the Crown is asking for basically aggravated mischief, where the most egregious or the biggest complaint on behalf of the Crown seemed to be honking. Was the main thing. I also heard something about an airport situation, but either way, there was murderers have gotten off for less in Canada.
Murderers get off right now as we're speaking for less. I mean, it's so funny to have this occurring with the juxtaposition of our Flag Day just had another round, as usual, of mass Hamas protesters literally shutting down streets in Toronto and in Montreal, doing exactly what this guy is charged of, to a higher degree, right? Where they're chanting for death of a particular group.
Yeah, and there doesn't seem like there's any highlighting or justice coming for any of the leaders of these protest organizations, which from my perspective it feels like it's all kind of staged.
It super feels staged, especially because, again, speaking of Dave Menzies, he gets arrested reporting on it. I don't know if you saw that also as well, right? So it's like, I don't know if you heard, I'm sure you have, the flak is always the strongest when you're above the target kind of deal, right? And it clearly seems to apply to both of these situations with Pat King and with David Menzies reporting on these types of things. Again, it's really quite crazy that, again, we have Pat King basically wishing for his own death because of the mistreatment from his country, purely for standing up for his own freedom. And then again, you have likely non-Canadians. A lot of them are non-Canadians, and the ones who are Canadians, again, you're allowed to protest, do your thing, 100%. I won't say I'm all for shutting down Ottawa to protest the vaccine mandates, right? So I can't be against someone shutting down the street for something they believe in. Again, especially how gruesome it seems to be over in the Middle East. But you can't have two tiers of justice, right? And
Right.
and again for murders too. Like in Oakville, I was at a Ron Chehinzer, he's the running MP for the Conservative Party. I was at one of his events. He had spoken mid-December at how a gentleman who was on bail for a violent crime, I forget what, I think it was an assault, had followed a guy home from, I think, the grocery store or whatever, waited for him to go to bed in his house, broke into his house, beat him in bed with a hammer, and then stole his car. And that guy's out, right? You also got a dude who got out for, I believe it was like Grand Theft Auto. I don't know if you saw it, walking down 403 shooting a gun at cars, right? I don't know if you had seen that either. Again, it's just
That
like
one.
thing after thing after
It
thing.
doesn't surprise me though. It's these, actual very flagrant crimes. Are it doesn't seem like there's effective justice when, in contrast to, you know, political protest and, those who are questioning the almighty Canadian government, and the powers behind the Canadian government,
Yeah,
um, are facing, massive penalty. And Pat King is not alone. From Pat King to Tamara Leach to Chris Barber to James Bowder, these represent, individuals who have been unjustly persecuted. And we saw Donald Trump pardon all the January 6th protesters,
mm-hmm.
J6ers, and from my perspective, the Freedom Convoy is like, is our January 6th, if you will, but it's not
It's
at
definitely
all.
the Canadian version, right?
But it's not, because at the end of the day, it was, civically engaged participants coming out, rightfully expressing, their dissatisfaction with the current policy and their right to protest, and they chose a different way. The thing was, it was really unsanctioned by the existing, government, and they didn't like that. Plus, it made global headlines. You've got Elon Musk saying things like "Canadian truckers rule,"
Yeah,
which it cast a really poor light on the Canadian government, and it seems like they have been very vindictive against, the people, and they're trying to like set an example,
yeah,
and which is terrifying. And
truly is, right? You can imagine
yeah,
why anyone would be concerned about sharing any of their views.
well,
The contrary to the crown.
and to be honest, Pierre Poilievre has not been like, a fighter for the people. He's not been, like an example of supporting, the Canadian people, or the truckers, or highlighting what they were really, why they came to Ottawa in the first place. It was about the vaccine mandates and the lockdowns, and
Which they turned out to
asking,
be correct about.
which they turned out to be entirely correct about. And Pierre Poilievre turned out to be entirely wrong about as well.
Yes.
And, he was pushing for accelerated, he was haranguing the government on their failure to roll it out or get mass injection of Canadians when, and this is the challenge that Canada seems to be going through, like politically, is you've got the Liberals, the NDP, the Conservatives, and then the PPC. And the PPC seems to have really absorbed a lot of the Tea Party element, the libertarian, like, this coalition, this Freedom Convoy coalition, I think is best represented by the PPC, and this. And the success and the strength of the PPC has enabled them to become the container for a lot of this Tea Party populist kind of sentiment, and the Conservative Party is able to, kind of distance itself from that and continue to be, more kind of mainstream. And and we're seeing now with, Trump's actions, that, I don't know. It's a little bit unclear as to where, because now all sides of the Canadian political spectrum. PPC, being this, this large, but has no representation within government,
Yeah,
zero whatsoever. So like, but it does have, it does represent, a large segment of Canadian sentiment.
it sure does.
But they have zero representation within Ottawa. I mean, fucking Green
And they
Party
likely
has
can't get it either, right? I
and
mean,
Frank, they're not going to be able to get it because the way the system is set up,
yeah,
and because like in this next election, people are going to choose, and I believe that the people will choose, the Conservative Party, and to be honest, it like that seems to be the smart move, if you will.
it's certainly a natural reaction to the last near decade of decline that we've faced in Canada. That
Yeah, and then
certainly
and
palpable at this point.
and President Trump has he's also inserted himself in the discussion, but there's no formal organization within Canada, to really look at, you know let's evaluate this option. Like, 51st state, that's a little bit aggressive, but like, I mean, Doug Ford used the term fortress amcan. Like, how do we make North America, strong and prosperous? And ultimately, I feel like Trump's using it's kind of a bargaining chip. Like,
Yeah,
this is his bargaining method, is start really strong and also like see how they react. And guess what? The Canadians, how they've reacted, like, they actually drive fear. They're trying to use fear towards, again, Trump is the devil incarnate.
Orange
Um,
Man bad, boo the American anthem,
He's horrible. Boo the American anthem.
making
Probably
half
like
of our entire country.
amplify that. I mean, I don't even know where that four nations thing like came from. Like, how long has that been planned for? And
Yeah,
for Russia to be excluded from it, and just to have this, like, especially with all the pro hockey players, like, it all kind of smells.
it does.
And um personally, I would like to have more of an open, honest discussion, because quite frankly, I don't see the Canadian federal government doing a whole lot for Canadians. They've done a lot for Ukraine. They've moved a lot of our money. They've transferred a lot of wealth, to,
Yeah.
let's say, globalist,
Oligarchs in the
globalist,
Ukraine
not
to
even
buy Maseratis.
globalist, like corporatocracy kind of agents, and
Yeah,
they're just transferring Canadian sovereign wealth into, like, through Ukraine back into the corporatocracy. And that's a thing that's been played out over and over again. And then during the whole, like, pandemic COVID scenario, they took they moved a lot of Canadian wealth, through subsidies, CERB, testing, PPE, and the injectables. Like, just an incredible amount of wealth got transferred out of the Canadian sovereign wealth, let's say.
yeah.
And as a result, you see inflation, higher costs. And inflation is really the only way to truly kind of measure that. And there is a ruling class in Canada that makes an incredible amount of money, and holds on to this power. But it seems like the rest of Canada has been kind of punched down on, and a lot of the top innovators in Canada have all left. And it's the situation is not looking great at the moment. But I firmly believe that nothing can stop the Great Awakening of humanity. And
Sure
and
try.
this corrupt Canadian, governmental Westminster system of these fake representatives.
Yeah,
um,
on
you know,
behalf of the king, who has a king in 2025. That's ridiculous.
on behalf of,
Government.
and like, and the monarch. And so, I
Yeah,
think what Trump is inviting people, or I mean, I would say we should invite ourselves to do, is have a discussion around Canadian independence. And it might not be joining America, but we should honestly look at what can we do as Canada? But
We need frankly, I believe we need to dissolve, abandon the Westminster system, uh, become a
I don't think it's. I
constitutional
mean,
republic.
personally, I don't believe it serves
Serves nothing.
the
Yeah.
Canadian population whatsoever any longer. And we've seen there's a lot of self-dealing and self-interest taking place at the high level within the government,
It's
and
almost entirely self-dealing.
and the amount of waste, like that, like this is why, like the calls for Doge in Canada, like and this is why I'm kind of optimistic, like I'm not going to write Pierre Poilievre off, because I mean, if he comes into power and part of him getting there is commitment towards Doge. Like, we desperately need to reduce the line item that government represents within Canada. Far too many Canadians are relying on the government to survive.
25% of our population works in one way or another. Their full-time job is through the Canadian government, right?
And I think
Incredible amount of people. That's
and it's
10.
a higher proportion of the voting population too.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
what that means is, if you're going to vote against the hand that feeds you.
You're not going to bite the hand that feeds us, for sure. Why would you? All right.
It's tough. It's unclear, but we'll see where how the Americans and President Trump and look at this. And plus, there's this there's a leadership vacuum in Canada right now. Like, Trudeau has declared that he will be resigning as soon as
he's done spending money all around the world on going to.
I mean, they're still spending all the money. They're still, like, the shadow government continues to operate, even though Parliament is not operating yet. And all of those people continue to be paid as well. And all their staff continue to get paid for doing absolutely nothing. It is absurd welfare, like, of our politicians.
It's $200,000 at least a year, right? The highest paid politicians in the world, I think, on average, are MPs.
Oh, I mean, yes, but even that, like, I mean, $200,000 Canadian is really, like,
yes, it might be 20 grand American, but it's still a lot of money here, right?
Well, I mean, it is, but it also isn't. Like, it's not like, you look at the housing costs, you look at everything, like, Canada is becoming very unaffordable. And also there's this sense of, like, people are punching down on people that are earning $200,000 as if they're, like, some sort of super elite. Well, guess what? $200,000 today is the equivalent
doesn't get you anything.
Making, like, $50,000 in year 2000.
Not only that, you're getting hit with like a 55% marginal tax rate up at that point, right? Like, you're literally you're losing more money than you make.
You're getting hit with a 55% income tax, then you're being hit with property taxes, then you're being hit with capital gains taxes, and you're being carbon taxes, and then you're also you're facing a sales tax as well, and then heaven forbid you pass away. Look, they're talking about estate taxes and death taxes, which ultimately cripples small business and family-owned businesses, property taxes, utilities. And then just throw into that the fact that we have a huge police force and bylaw force. I know in Ottawa specifically, like, they've started putting up speed cameras and red light cameras everywhere. Yeah. So those end up, like, sucking more. And if you get a 500, I mean, I got a ticket in Ottawa for I think it was $700 for being on for like, I was FaceTiming with my wife with the thing, and I was at a red light, or I don't know if it was FaceTime or I was checking the map or something, but I got pulled over at a red light. Yeah. And got a $700 ticket for touching my phone while driving. And so, you factor in $700, and if that has to come from whatever free cash flow you have left at the end of the day. So the effective cost of that is it's like a $2,000 ticket. That is destructive to the point of nothing. After that, I was like, fuck this. I cannot stand this. And then also, I mean, they have red light cameras in Ottawa where they actually have shorter yellow lights on them. So it's such deceptive bullshit behavior that's actively going after and trying to punish the people and draw like the very few resources that Canadians have and that the citizens of Ottawa have. And I know that's happening in Toronto too, and it's probably happening in all the suburbs as well. And
Yeah.
like, the bylaw force in Ottawa is so large that they have to go out there and they have to basically pull in fines to cover their costs. And so it's just insanely destructive, at large.
Yeah. No, I mean, I couldn't agree more. It seems as if the state is just there to oppress and take your money. That seems to be the only purpose of the Canadian government at this point.
Yeah.
Especially given the fact that we have a government prorogued since December, and God knows how long that's going to last, right?
Well, and even when they are, even if it wasn't prorogued, they would still be, there's still this de facto majority government via a soft alliance between the Liberals and the NDP. And, they continue like pushing all their bullshit rhetoric of Ukraine this, Hamas that, DEI this, Pride that. Like whenever actually dealing in any issues, and when challenged on any issues, they just resort to not answering any questions and
Well, that seems to be
gaslighting. And
that seems to be the go-to move. And actually, I've seen you say on multiple podcasts, and I do think it's right. There seems to be like it's a low vibration type of energy sucking thing that everyone focuses on, like these LGBTQ issues, whatever the hell it is, the Ukraine, this, that. It's all seemingly to draw attention away from the actual mismanagement, constant mismanagement of our government, and the deep-seated corruption that is there as well within it.
right, or and it also like detracts from what do we want? How do we actually solve these solutions? How can we fix this this dastardly taxation regime that we have in Canada? How do we get rid of income tax in Canada? How do we encourage money and capital flow back to Canada? It's almost like they do not want capital to flow back into Canada because it would upset the very strong hand of control that they have. More new money, more entrepreneurs, more innovation within Canada would create power structures outside of the existing power structures. So it almost seems like they're intentionally kind of punching down and trying to keep that away. And the government's in charge of handing out the big contracts. And guess what? The government hands out big contracts that could be done for like 1,000th of the cost if they allowed it to the free market, or if these were actual challenges that needed to be solved.
Yeah, well, and then that's kind of like it reminds me of the Musk thing with Starlink in Ontario, right? I believe, and I'm pretty sure Mark Carney was involved in the transaction. I forget the name of the company. It was a Quebec company, and they got like $3 billion to do satellites, to set satellites up to get internet to people in remote areas. And they spent all the money, and they didn't build a single satellite. And they're requesting more money to do it. And then I saw Michael Barrett, so he had tweeted out and actually got response from Elon Musk, which triggered this Musk hate within our parliament. That really lined up with public Musk hate from the Liberal side and from the NDP. And he had said he could do it for, I think it was like $150 million, right? So instead of 3 billion, you've got Musk being able to do it for 150 million, and then that's just another example of that waste, right?
Oh yeah, I mean there's no shortage of solutions that can be done, but when you seek the government to solve these problems, they don't solve them. They just waste time and energy and money and don't end up solving them.
No, they pay themselves, right? Like have you seen the Green Slush Fund? Are you familiar with that? No, right? Yeah, so you were busy with RFK in the United States, and congratulations on that, by the way. That is truly probably the
it's going to be
most important part of the recent election, in my opinion, down in the United States. That man got in, and to have any sort of influence whatsoever, that will be great. I hope he
has helped now. So
yeah, right.
Pretty good.
So that's amazing. But with that happening, we've got the Green Slush Fund up here, kind of that same timeline where the U.S. election was going on, right? And that was the tune at this point. It might be closer to $1 billion, but it was $400 million of improperly awarded contracts through a green accelerator fund that was set up by the Liberal government. They paid off. Their board members didn't recuse themselves, so they awarded contracts within their own board to each other for hundreds of millions of dollars. You got Annette Verscheren. I don't know if you're familiar with Annette Verscheren. She has the Verscheren Center out in Nova Scotia, I think, or did at least up until this point. She was the chair of SDTC. So that's the Green Slush Fund. It's the Sustainable Development Technology Canada, which is just a fancy way of saying we're wasting your money. Taxes make the weather gooder, right? But so she got like $30 million. She just stole 30. It's theft. It's nothing but theft. They fancy it up because it's through procurement, but it's theft, and they've stolen like $400 million. It might even be more because they're saying that Stephen Guilbeault, right? He has, you don't know Stephen Guilbeault? He climbed up the
Stephen Guilbeault. Oh yeah, I know Stephen Guilbeault.
Yeah, he's a radical environmentalist. God love him, but so he had Cycle Capital, right? He's part owner of, or what I forget his exact ownership in it, but it's his company, and they received $264 million that didn't do anything through SDTC while he was an MP in cabinet MP. Randy Bosno, same thing, right? Like he had I don't know if you've seen any of his. The scandals are just like it's hard to keep up with, right? It really truly is. That's why this Pat King thing didn't even make it on my radar. That's from January, and I'm finding out the day before, a couple days before, how brutal that is. And I do.
And they don't want to highlight Pat King. They want to, send a message that it probably won't even touch the mainstream media, but they want to send a message, because if Pat King gets 10 years, everybody within the Freedom Convoy will know exactly that. But they won't let that spread to the mainstream media, because
I don't know how they could do that. If they set that case law, they'll have to apply it to these morons in the
and again, it'll just force more. And one of the things about Pat, no lawyers would touch him either. And it's nobody wanted to if it wasn't for the Democracy Fund, I know they've been very kind of active in supporting a number of the members.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to kind of support any of these people, because it's there's repercussions towards speaking truth in an empire of lies.
Yeah, no, for sure. Hopefully we can set something up. I know YouTube has straight donations. I don't know. I got people that I was speaking with online on X there. Hopefully we can help set up a fund for Pat or something. Because again, when I read this, it really did break my heart, and it in fact made me lose, like I said at the beginning of this, any shred of hope I had left for our country. I read this and I'm like 51st state. That was my immediate reaction. Now I do want to just quickly go through this with you.
Sure.
Just because I want it to be out in the public. So this is from January 17th this year, and surprise, Pat King speaks. He says he feels remorse. He did not expect it to happen. He honors and respects the court and accepts the findings of the court. It comes from a long line. A family who spent time in the military, takes a lot of pride in the country, who takes a lot of pride in family and who he is, and his pride is being vanished, defamed, slandered, raked through the coals, and more that he can shake a stick at. He is extremely sorry for what happened to Ottawa and apologized for his actions. Intention was not to hurt citizens, but to speak to the government, and it never happened. Yeah, because again, your lovely brother did not do anything but stoke fear and division with this. I'm sure you're right there with the Freedom Convoy online.
I mean, that was the government policy, was to enrage versus engage, because you can't engage on myths and lies. So they can't debate. They can't debate the science behind the PPE or the masks or the the injections. They just cannot debate it. So instead, they have to just, attack and gaslight, and smear using the mainstream media system, and turn people like Pat King into pariahs, into evil characters. I mean, look at W5 did a bullshit covering of these characters, and just like the way they spin it, the deep propaganda. And this is what's so dangerous about having a media that is funded by the government, is
Yes.
it becomes tool of it.
It's fucking
And
ridiculous.
and to the point where they're trying to, it's like, in the UK, people are getting thrown in jail for speaking against.
It's coming here.
This is what we have to look forward to in Canada, as long as we continue underneath the reign of the king,
Bill
and we do
C-63.
have a charter of rights and freedoms, or we do not have a constitution by which laws are upheld, and the
Both of
society is.
which are penetrable.
Instead, we have this crazy system that's currently going, where it's really unclear. It's selective enforcement, and there's political persecution and lawfare waged against those who are freely expressing their concerns around.
While simultaneously condemning it across the planet.
Yeah, and
It's like,
yeah. Don't worry.
rules for thee, not for
Fucking
me.
Ukraine is the shining example of democracy. Justin kept saying, and they could keep saying, Ukraine. We're fighting for democracy in Ukraine. Bullshit. You're
Bullshit,
fighting
right.
literally for globalism and money laundering, and based on false.
Was it not in the case that in 2014 or 15 they were full of Nazis and bad guys? I'm pretty sure when Vice News went over there, that was the vibe, right? And so that switched pretty quick. I don't know how the hell that happened. But they're clearly stealing our money. I mean, like, I think the president's wife has a Bugatti now. What are you, Andrew Tate? Why do you have a Bugatti? Your country's at war. You shouldn't even have a BMW.
No, I mean the whole everything about that conflict just stinks, and it has deep roots, and it's a longer story.
Yeah, well, digress was probably the best for something like that. But it just is another example. And while we have 2 million people going to food banks in Canada, we're sending billions of dollars across the planet, right? It's rules for thee, not for me.
And Pat King, I mean,
disgusting.
look at that. I own my actions. Pat King, he served 6 months in the Ottawa jail.
Yep.
And during this time, he was mistreated. He was threatened by guards and inmates. He was held in isolation for 38 days with the lights on. This is torture.
In fucking Canada.
This is torture. This is like unbelievable torture. Like, this would be considered crimes against humanity if it made this to The Hague. This is insane.
And who's responsible for? We'll continue with this, because I want to get to who's responsible for that, because again, the certain crimes charged at The Hague, right? Like the responsibility does fall ultimately on the state and on the head of the state, right? And whoever that might be. But yeah, I own my actions. I was mistreated 38 days, lights on. I was put in a cell with a man for double homicide for mischief. I lived with that man and scared he would be killed in his sleep, given no opportunity to have medical care when asking. I screamed and yelled, almost had a staph infection because he's got one leg, the poor guy. It wasn't until one guard came up and spoke and said that you have a man in maximum wing for mischief. He needs medical care. He needs to be out of there. He brought me to the infirmary where he got medical care, treatment he went through, solitary confinement. Like you said, it was torture. That's his own words here. It's torture, right? He did not deserve that. The shower, not accommodating to a man of my disability. Again, you're in the United States. I don't know if you're familiar. Paul Bernardo, what happened with him last year? Arif Virani, all right, the head of the Attorney General was pushing to have him, like behind the scenes, pushing his office was pushing to have him released from maximum security and put into a medium security, which they did. He was in a prison. I don't know if he's still there or not, but he was in a prison with a hockey rink. Okay. They had hockey. Paul Bernardo's getting hockey. He gets to play hockey. He gets to play tennis, and Pat King gets tortured. You know what I mean? Can you think of anybody other than Robert Picton who elicits that response in Canadians like Paul Bernardo? You can't, right? The worst of the worst that we have. And then they're treating this guy like this. The shower not accommodating. If I take a shower with a metal leg, I'll slip and fall. I need a chair. Didn't get it until a guard fought for him. While in prison, I get emotional. One of the proudest moments a parent gets is to see his child graduate and move on to secondary. So proud of my oldest kid. He was accepted to Tokyo School for Aerospace. He was going to see his graduation and missed out on it, which strained his relationship. So when you read in PSR, I have a strained relationship, it's because of this. And for that, I'm so ashamed of what I did to hurt my son in that way, one of the worst feelings in the world. Now I get out of jail and in repair mode. I'm under constant surveillance, not only by law enforcement, but by sureties. I'm constantly under watch, lived for 2 years with lack of sleep because of door knocks for a year and a half at 3 in the morning. Wasn't a regular knock, but boot to the door. Like obviously people harassing him. Says he doesn't sleep well. So when we talk about the people went through in Ottawa, I can relate to understanding this. His funds are locked out for his son to go to college. He couldn't pay for his kid to go to college, saved up, probably assuming the majority of his adult life to do that. His younger son is going to college next year. He can't fund it. Go through here. Tax online, stalking. Obviously, they've come after his family. What really hurt me was it down here too? Because his family's obviously abandoned him because where do you get your information in Canada? Especially someone of his age, his parents, right? Straight from the CBC. So your son's a Nazi or whatever they'll equate him to, right? He's an extremist who deserves to be treated like the other, right? My mother doesn't want anything to do with me. I'm sorry I did this to my family. I'm sorry I did this to my mom. It's really heartbreaking. And then this part is what really got me. If you give me 10 years, I may as well get made. Give me 10 years, I may as well get made. Don't want to live in a country where the punishment for standing up is 10 years. He's sorry for what he did, the uncomfortable people went through. And right here, this is the capitulation from the state. This is what they wanted, I assume. I wouldn't suggest anyone follow in my path. I wouldn't allow anyone to do what I did. And I'd scream at them from the top of my lungs. If your honor is worried about a lesser sentencing, it's incredible. It's awful. And you get sentenced tomorrow, right? How do you think that sentence is going to go? It's not going to go well.
Well, I mean, I have hope that I have hope that consciousness prevails, and the judge determines time served is good, and he gets released.
I'm hoping they have the foresight of case law, because this will set precedent in Canada, right? That's what we'll do, and they will have to apply this law equally. You would assume, right? And given that they seem to not only not care about, but frankly encourage the Hamas protests that are going on in Canada every day, that they literally shut down highways and shut down streets, which is what Pat King is charged with. They will have to apply that equally, and I hopefully they don't. But who do you think is responsible for that? You know what I mean? Sorry, a little muscle cramp there. Who do you think is responsible for that though? Is it Justin Trudeau? Who is responsible for that?
I mean, I'll go back to this as this is the corporatocracy is responsible for this. This is the New World Order's agenda of removing the rights of the people. And Justin is a spokesperson. He bears responsibility as a spokesperson for the party. The party ultimately, law enforcement ultimately, the judges ultimately are responsible for this. The media is responsible for this. The planners that orchestrated this entire nonsense COVID response and radical spending and locking down and destruction of Canadian middle class, lower class family businesses, small businesses, while enriching, the upper echelon like never before. I think it's pretty clear like, who benefited from this. And I think, we know those who stood up against this in America. Like we've seen, like, Canada's just trailing here. Canada is trailing behind.
Absolutely. I have a chart with that actually. They are 100% trailing behind. Right? I
I'll
mean,
stop sharing this too, by the way.
sorry?
Is you might want to stop sharing this screen because it's gonna affect your final recording.
Yes, sorry.
Not to do anything else. And I mean, yeah, the tragedy of Pat King, and like, the fact that he's saying, if I get sentenced at 10 years, just fucking kill me. Like, you may as well just kill me. I'll be a martyr in that sense. And like, even though I like, take me away from my son, his graduation, all for what? Participating in a protest, when again, you have these other protests. You had Justin kneeling for Black Lives Matter, for supporting that, for condoning violence in the streets because of this systemic racial inequality. When all of a
It doesn't
sudden,
exist in Canada.
fucking government is experimenting on the Canadian population through forced mass injections of without informed consent. Go look at Sean Hartman. Go look at, like,
Yeah.
Justice for Sean.
Justice for Sean.
A child who immediately passed after receiving that injection.
Yeah.
Like, this is like, he is not alone. There are many people who have lost. Like, in all of our families, we've lost, and people are attributing it to what, this is long COVID. This is this is that. This is that. No. Let's honestly, and like, we had the COVID inquiry, a public inquiry into COVID done by the citizens of Canada, National Citizens Inquiry, which was extremely extensive and extremely, like, they sought out all sorts of information to help document it when the government could, because the government was complicit
Yeah.
in this really dastardly narrative that just punched down on all Canadians, just did so much economic destruction. You can never let that happen again. And this is why, like, this time, Pierre, it's time for you to stand the fuck up and trying to you be a man and stand up, and so don't care about how the polls are looking. This is about what's right and wrong. And honestly, people will appreciate it. And this isn't about you being a Trump supporter. You've got to move. Canada has to move away from this basic bullshit, like, identifying people as, oh, that's Trump, therefore you're bad. Fuck that, man.
Doesn't make sense.
No, exactly. We have to stop that nonsense and start actually, like, critically analyzing things and holding people accountable for the nonsense, because, like, there is a lot of bullshit that's going on, and call out the government. Like, this pact that the NDP and the Liberals made, it equaled pensions. It equaled a bunch of money for them. And now, like, you might bring in Mark Carney, and you might, like, they might just extend it. It might not have an election until 2026 is, the murmurings I'm hearing, which gives, again, like,
that's correct.
And Justin called the, his speechwriters and the powers behind, called, like, those behind the Freedom Convoy of, a small fringe minority. Well, guess what, bro? Guess what, Liberal Party? You actually represent a small fringe minority. You represent about 25%, maybe 20, little less than that, of actual Canadians voted for you. And yet, you, with the NDP, who have received an even smaller percentage, are governing with, like, a dictatorial mandate, to the point where you actually disbanded government because it just wasn't working. So shadow government.
In the middle of extensive investigation. By the way, it's SCTC. Done. All the investigations over. They were in the middle of doing it. Do you know? So you know what was going on?
Exactly.
They
shut down. But again, the government wasn't going to investigate itself. The governments don't investigate themselves. They don't investigate their corruption. They cover it up. And this is why we so desperately need Doge. We so desperately need independent, fresh blood looking into this. And this is why, as Canadians, we need to think very fucking critically about which way we're going to move forward. Is the Westminster system of government, is the Canadian Parliament really serving our best interests? Is the fact that they are paying large bot farms and influencer groups using our Canadian money to gaslight, to hypnotize, to put everybody under a spell into thinking Orange Man bad, and Team Canada good. Like Team Canada, you should have national pride. Look, everybody, wave your flag. Put your flags up. When it wasn't a couple of years ago, when you literally canceled Canada Day
I just found
effectively,
out the flag was racist.
made it about
Did you know
every
that?
Canadian to be a victim for like the residential schools, which again, like that was like that
You
Canadians
can't,
do
what
not
you
need to
can't
hold
deny,
guilt
they're
for that.
trying to make it illegal to even question that, by the way, which obviously it occurred. The 60s scoop is a documented thing.
To question what?
With residential schools. So in Canada, you can't deny the Holocaust. It's illegal, actually. Um, we don't have freedom
Yeah,
of
no,
speech,
no, and the
and so
thing with the
they're
residential
also making that.
schools, and the thing and just on the residential schools,
Yes,
they have used that to try and create national guilt and
they
also
paid.
create further victimization
They did
of
reparations. Did you know that?
and and reparations. But the
They
like
paid them
they
40K a pop.
all Canadians should harbor guilt for the residential schools. To which I respond, fuck that.
Fuck that.
No, Canadians don't need to hold guilt for that. The government needs to hold guilt for that. The church needs to hold
Church.
guilt for that. But the people of Canada do not need to walk around with their heads bowed down. And also, the native population of Canada, we have to stop making them constantly the victims. It does not serve that population to always treat them as, oh, the so sad story
It's
victims of
money
someone.
laundering within our own country. It's our own Ukraine.
It's further punching down on them and on Canada. And literally, they canceled Canada Day a couple of years ago. They're like,
Yep.
no, we can't because of all this. All well, because I mean that was following the that was in 22.
Mhm.
That was following the trucker rally when the last thing they wanted was a whole bunch of people waving Canadian flags when they were literally trying to create brand the flag as something to trigger
It's right wing
sensitive,
extremism.
hypnotized Canadians with.
I saw before this whole Canada America whatever debacle that's going on that's being manufactured, because I don't think there's actually really any thinking Canadians who dislike America or Americans. Right? There's not. I don't know anybody. But the flag
No, and
was racist. They said they were taking it back from right wing extremists. I didn't know the flag was racist. Since when
well,
was
yeah,
the flag
it's just
racist?
like this radical projection
That's it.
of the
Radical
government.
projection.
It's like everything is right wing extremists, and it's like anybody that question, and this just roots back to this there are alternative worldviews in play here. There are the government. Honestly, I think a lot of them believe in what they're saying,
I
which is
couldn't imagine.
likely.
Do you really think they believe what they're saying?
I
I
think
can't
some of them
imagine.
I think some of them do believe what they're saying. And and when challenged with it, they pucker right up and they will hyperventilate and leave. They just cannot engage. And this is what's so concerning is that there's no space for discourse and debate. And
Yeah.
the science is settled. Then that was the same with climate change. And God, did they ever push that shit on Canada so hard? There's
It's
nothing wrong with being environmentalist. Look at Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy recognized he was and is an environmentalist, and he
yeah,
wants to protect the waters and wants to protect the air and the soil and the species of this planet. And there was a time when he believed that the carbon the carbon was was that, but he has since understood that simplifying everything into some carbon manufactured number
just a boogeyman.
doesn't doesn't solve anything. And allowing corporations to just pay to become net zero, we want to become net zero. What the fuck does that mean? It literally is
It's a gaze. It's a literal fugazi.
it's not. It has nothing to do with actually solving any problems or protecting our environment, or it's just all further fear mongering and projection. And yeah, so I'm hoping that like, the carbon tax needs to be axed completely, but it's not the only tax that in like, and let's focus. I'd like to shift this discussion because, I'm feeling a low vibe out of all of it right now of the challenges of it. I would like to focus on what the solutions are and what the ideal outcomes are. We need to return capital to Canada. We need to get all of our amazing entrepreneurs and builders and creators and innovators that all left because it was like, dude, this is not an environment in which we can operate. The capital in Canada, if you're successful in Canada, you offshore your money. You move that money onto
You
the
look forward to
islands. You move
leaving.
that to America. You move it to Switzerland. You move it to Dubai. You do not keep that money in Canada. So none of that money gets spent in Canada. So it's like, we need to remove the income tax in Canada. We need to remove capital gains tax in Canada. We
Yeah.
need to remove the carbon tax, remove the death tax. Literally, we already have a consumption tax, and they're like talking about like lowering the GST and getting rid of come on, the GST is not the problem.
It's
The
already over.
consumption is
It
not the
was a fake
problem.
GST pause just
It's
to
like and that
deflect.
like, how about an income tax pause instead? How about we just eliminate the income tax, the temporary war measure that became a system of control,
Yeah.
on Canadians? How about we eliminate that one? Like let's and honestly, and implement tariffs. It's
Yeah.
not that hard. But again, like all of a sudden, oh shit, tariffs are super bad, and you've got crazy wingnuts like I
Tariffs are bad because Trump's saying it, right? If Trudeau came out
like
saying, if your brother
like, we're
came
gonna
out
charge
saying it'd
Tesla's
be
a
different.
100% like pure like this is like political theater rhetoric but if you want to have tariffs on imports like 25% like 100%, they're talking in really big numbers. Like they don't need to be that big. We can be talking 2%, 3%. We can actually do a huge offset and enable us to no longer spend so much. Plus, there needs to be a like the entire federal government. Honestly, I do not see the purpose of it any
No,
longer. I do
it is
not
just to
know
steal from the people. That's it.
what it's doing. The military barely exists. The border is like but the government and the agencies and oh my god, there's just
So it's hard to make it a positive thing. The way to look, I think the way to look at it, because you can look at any situation one of two ways. You can be negative about it or be positive about it. It should inspire you to want to make change rather than to flee. But I think that's the only positive to take really from the system at the time. Like it really is actually, frankly, that bad. I mean, again, right before we have prorogation, we've got Parliament shut down for nearly 90 days because the RCMP ordered Justin Trudeau and his Liberal government to table the unredacted documents of the Sustainable Development Technology Canada Fund, where we show all of the
I
improper
mean,
payments.
exactly. It's scandal after scandal after scandal after scandal, and this is like the threat of like a Doge or like radical transparency would just showcase like and there's honestly it's like there's a lot of crooked money that flowed out and like finding ways to bring some of that back and also just like the first thing you can do is you stop the continued distributions of money. Just cut them off. That's like what Trump did with USA. Like, no, it's done. We're just suspending all payments. We'll look at like the quality ones. We'll look, but like right now, we got to cut off all this because like it has to stop because there's just way too much corruption and this money is flowing back in to money is flowing back into our media into creating this this fake reality
Yeah, it's a protective
amongst
layer around the
amongst
people doing the crime.
amongst the hypnotized. I'll say among those who are underneath the who are trapped in the full spell of the
Yeah,
the media.
I agree. But again, it comes down to all these decisions are coming from someone, right? Like they are coming from the PMO. They are coming from the Prime Minister's office. They are coming from the dude running the country for 9 years, right? There's a
Oh,
reason.
well, again, I mean, I will say again, he's an energy vacuum. He's not writing the policy. He's not making the decision. He's speaking the words because that's his
But
role.
that
But
absolves him of all responsibility, though. When you
it
say
doesn't, of course, it doesn't absolve him of responsibility. The entire fucking party bears responsibility for it. Who's writing the policy? Who's writing the speeches? Who's funding it? Like, looking at those who are providing him. Oh, I agree though. He bears responsibility
ultimate
because
responsibility is the prime minister
he is the leader of the party
of the
and
country.
the whole of and the country.
Like
He
this
is.
Pat King thing, could he not? If we lived in a place,
It's not an executive branch.
no, I understand it's not, but it's also the fact that if the Prime Minister of Canada spoke out against the improper treatment of a prisoner, you're telling me that wouldn't make a difference? Of course it would. Of course it would. Right.
Yeah.
So these are conscious decisions that you're making. While this
No,
is
and it
while
would
this is
also
happening
hey, and it
over
would also
in
speak
your
if
Ukraine.
Pierre Poilievre were to stand
Without
up and
question, but he's not the prime minister.
share that. No, he's not. He's the head of the opposition though, and he should doing everything in his part in his
Without
power.
question. He's certainly not
Again,
doing that, and that's why he's dropping in the polls too, for the record. That's why there's this clear vacuum with Mark Carney.
well, I mean, again, the polls in Canada are about as
Trustworthy as anything.
about as honest as the government is.
Yeah.
Like and this is another part of the problem is, the polls dictate the policy and the polls dictate government action, and the corporations oftentimes fund the polls towards driving that public sentiment, which the media then reports on, which then the government reacts to. It's a weird, corrupt little triangle, and we have a corrupt polling system and a data system within Canada that that is really honestly part of the problem, because we don't really have too much, and it's small sample sizes, and then your fake media goes and reports this out, and then the people believe what they're hearing because across this controlled media they all flood the zone with this fake data, and then everybody believes in that, and that's why you have literally this is the fucking matrix in Canada of people believing this bullshit and thinking that again, that Pat King is someone that deserves to spend 10 years in jail, another
graduation, right?
And just family and that's why, all the truckers should have their bank accounts. Oh, yeah, the Emergency Act was justified. And oh, yes, why we should.
And then who did that? Again,
funding Ukraine ad nauseum. And why we should, on next thing. But
what responsibility, again, does Justin Trudeau bear? Right? It's got to be the ultimate responsibility, unless there's a cabal controlling him, right? And then
we know there is a cabal controlling him, though, right?
Is there, though?
Of course there. You think Justin's the top of the pyramid? Come on, man.
In Canada, I think he is
Come on,
head of the
he's not.
Well, who else would it be? Who else would it be? Right? I did see, actually, I do want to, because this is actually what made me want to reach out to you. And before I show you this, I did want to mention, which we're kind of way off topic, but I voted for your brother in 2015 to become the Prime Minister of Canada. And when I saw you on Tucker, when you first did the thing, you looked, right, and sounded like the guy I thought I voted for, which I thought was quite funny. I'm like, that's the Trudeau. I know you're not Trudeau, but that's the family member that was projected, right? And we got the opposite. I thought that was just quite funny. But this, to that point, who's controlling, right? I just want to show you this, and I'm sure you've seen this because it's gotten quite viral here. Can I play this for you? Do you mind?
Oh yeah, sure, you can play that.
Because I want to. This is very interesting, and I want. There's a lot of speculation on who this is towards.
What is Justin Trudeau's brother trying to tell us here? To anyone who's blackmailed out there, or went to a white party, for example, took a sip of a drink, got a little bit crazy, and then you're a little bit disconnected from reality, and all of a sudden you find yourself participating in some sort of sick ritual, and guess what? You find out later that that was all recorded, and now you need to tell you to do manipulates the cabinets. You're a victim, trapped. You may have consciously made that decision, but by giving in to the black man and the orders and execute tyranny of the extreme minority that seeks to rule the black man, coercion, deception, division. Release yourself from it.
Couldn't agree more. Who is that? Who is that directed to? Is that to your brother? That seems to be.
I mean, now it's to all the victims of the blackmail, which I think we know, and I'll say I believe Justin. I don't have any proof, but given the nature
You think he
of
was blackmailed?
anyone who gets into I would say all of the leaders around the world who get into these positions, especially, who orchestrated, who were forced into the grand, COVID plan and became kind of puppets and repeaters, from Justin to Jacinda to, what was the British guy's name?
Oh, shoot, at the time. They're going through so many since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is like, all across the world, like, there's this, concerted action. And we know, like, and now with, the Diddy files and the Epstein files and, the nature of manipulation and power and control. I mean,
what you're implying there, right?
it wouldn't surprise me in the least,
Yeah.
to get into a position of that power, that there's insurance to assure that, you keep rolling on that thing. And my plea to all these people is to come clean, to apologize, to release, to try and break that spell and expose it. But it's a
Well, I mean, the examples,
like you look at Yale Skull and Bones Club, like, these rituals these rituals that are known rituals that people do, which are disgusting and satanic, in my opinion. It forges a bond of which, everyone is kind of under it, and you work together, for this aim. And
well, and the examples you used, Diddy and especially Epstein, like if that is what's going on, if that's who's running the country, right? It kind of also brings me to which the number one question I got to ask you, which is related to that video, is about West Point Grey Academy, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, right?
That was the school that he taught at in Vancouver.
Well, because it was the case that his roommate and best friend and closest colleague at West Point Grey was the ringleader of an international child pornography ring. And he was arrested by he didn't even need evidence, so Australian police were allowed to issue his arrest in Canada. So I read into it, it was accessed via his home computer and his work computer, right? And then at the same time, earlier in that time period, I think it was the early 2000s or the late 90s or whatever it was when he was there was 5 reasons given for Mr. Trudeau leaving West Point Grey. And one of them was issued by a law office. And all of the 5 reasons were different from each other, right? And then this came up as well in 2019, in the election in 2019, where the Buffalo Chronicle, if I can get over here, the Buffalo Chronicle, and it said that there's a $2.5 million settlement put out, and that settlement was given to a wealthy businessman's daughter to suppress this. Right. And it seems to be the case that in 1999, there was an inappropriate relationship with a 14-year-old girl that was there. And the crazy thing is that the blackface stuff that came out, which is whatever, it's silly. It's actually, but anyway, that came from the same place, same yearbook that these allegations came from as well. And then the Buffalo Chronicle had put out an updated article, and Buffalo Chronicle has never in our entire operating history been sued for defamation or any other matter. We've never once received a cease and desist letter from the subjects of any article since we began publishing in 2014, and they did not receive one for this article as well. And in this, they allege that Trudeau had paid off a $2.5 million to this check to sign an NDA in order to keep quiet about that. And then it just, with your video talking about coming clean.
I have nothing to add. I mean, I'm like that. That's 2020 or that's 2000. You know, I'm 16 years old. I don't have any knowledge of that. I knew like Chris Ingvoldson was his roommate.
Yep.
And he was tried. And again, bro, like I don't have anything to add.
I assume based on your age that you don't, but what I'm sure you heard about that when it occurred. There's no way you didn't when you were 16.
What?
Well, when that became public?
I mean,
in 2019? Did you hear about it when it happened in 2019?
I mean, look, 2019, yes. Like in looking, but again, I don't have any, like, there's nothing that materially that I can add other than to say.
Just conjecture.
I'm not saying that's conjecture. I don't know what I would say is conjecture is the whole Castro thing. That one is like the most brilliant piece of conjecture.
Yeah, I don't think that's accurate. They don't really look. They don't really look the same. Do you think?
No. I think that is the most brilliant piece of conjecture that's created as a distraction from everything else. That was seeded to suck in, like, as a shield for Justin to actually distract all conversations away from, like, things like, like what you might be mentioning here. Mm-hmm. But I'm not, this isn't an area that I'm not, it doesn't serve, like, it's not a place for me to add, because I don't have anything, to add. I don't have anything concrete. I don't have any evidence. I don't have any
feeling though on something like that. Do you think that happened?
I don't. I mean, I know that Justin was, how old was he at the time?
1999. I don't know how old he would have been then. He probably been in his mid-20s.
28, I think. 20. Like, at that time. It's not for me to say, but nothing would kind of surprise me. Like,
that wouldn't surprise me.
But again, this is not my
I know position. It's not. I know it's not, but
and this doesn't have shit to do with making Canada great again. And so I'm serious. Yeah. And like, if we want to play Justin games, and like, me being like, some sort of key towards.
No, like, I don't think you're key to anything. It's just
exactly. I don't. It's like, this is just. I know people are interested in that. And trust me, man. I've dealt with a lot of people, and I've had had late night calls with people who have, in their minds, connected all these fucking dots to the point where it's like, somehow my other brother was like, was murdered, and this and that and this and that, and like, I'm not even going to get into it, because it's just, this doesn't get us. This discussion doesn't make Canada great again. This discussion doesn't, like, Justin can face his own justice. It's not my place to participate, on that discussion. I feel like, I've gone over this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I do appreciate your comment on that, and it just kind of comes down to, the who's controlling and what they have to control over him, right? So if that's the case, that's what they
So
have,
again, now it's
and
like,
then it
you
makes
want to
sense
talk
though
about
that
the
we have the
control
freedom.
structure. Look to look to the global cabal cult, the spider, as David Icke considers it. This is this new world order. This is what Klaus Schwab penetrates. I do believe Klaus Schwab himself is a bit of an energy vacuum and a front man, for actual power brokers. You look at the Bilderberg Group. You look at the Council on Foreign Relations. You look at the way that these groups kind of operate and do long-tailed geopolitical planning, and long scale. They view nation leaders as spokespeople, as just frontmen in the grand global pyramid of power. Justin Trudeau is not at the top of that. In the grand global power,
Sure.
Justin Trudeau is not at the top of the Canadian pillar either. He represents, he is a spokesperson kind of voice.
Well,
And
I've heard you say he's the captain of the team, right?
yeah, he's like the captain
No,
of the
he's
hockey
not writing the
team.
plays, but
He's not writing the plays. He's not.
you
He's
think he
not
has
the owner of
zero
the play.
influence
He's
on
not
the
the
plays
coach.
whatsoever, though? Is he
Honestly, I
just
don't
there
think
to be
he does.
pretty? Because he gets things done, right? It is not the case that he's an ineffective prime minister for his own
No, he gets
for
things,
his
and he's an
party.
excellent, and he's an excellent talker, and he's an excellent actor. He's an excellent, conveyor, and he's been able to, play his part pretty well. And he did push forward, the agenda and represent the agenda, of the party and of the party's masters, all in the face of the will of the people. And this is where, ultimately, I believe that Canada and and other nations, it's become of the people, of the party, by the party, for the party, as opposed to of the people, by the people, for the people. And that's where it's feels right now like we need to have, there needs to be a shift.
I do want to mention too about the whether this is not making Canada great again. I do see how the inflammatory, subject matter obviously might be a bit Barbary for you, and how it might not exactly seem as if it would be perhaps helpful to moving the discussion along. But that also, I think, I mean, if you're looking at what's getting uncovered in the United States, it's not like you can just have had issues, acknowledge them, and then move on. You have to investigate them, right? And if
Oh, I agree.
if there are people, okay, like you are saying, in this global cabal, so to speak, which again I have no reason to doubt that that's the case, given any number of things you can point to. Who and what are they having on are they on these individuals, and is it the worst crime ever, right? Is it the worst crime ever, and is that what's being held over these people that allow them to quite literally ruin an entire nation, right? Like, how long have you been in the United States, sir? Like, living full time?
Since 2020.
Since 2020. It's gotten bad in 5 years, right? Like, personally, not, but externally, it's not good, right? The like you said, it's a low vibration on the thing. Why do you think that is, right? Like, there is no high vibration in Canada. It's kind of been melted, right? Like, when you've got the ability to go protest something that you don't agree with your government, right? That makes you feel like you have a say in what occurs in the government. And then if you're punished for that, you really don't have a say in the government. And what kind of recourse do the people have other than pointing at the leaders that are making decisions and trying to dismantle them from the outside, right?
Again, that's easy, and that's that's the blame the hockey captain for not winning the game, and try and get a new captain and hope you'll win the game, recognizing that the whole game is rigged, is the key to this. And that's why this system of this parliamentary Westminster system of governance, combined with a crooked judiciary system, where murderers are being let free after a couple of years, whereas Pat King is being politically persecuted for 10 years, where fucking government. You're not allowed to advertise drugs on TV, but you have literally the heads of Health Canada out there coercing the Canadian population towards taking experimental injection,
And also
which
just regular narcotics and heroin and cocaine.
and, exactly, so yeah,
Yeah.
like this is the state, and again, and now it's I look at like what are the actions that can be taken forward. Is there potential for a referendum in Canada? Potentially. It's tough though.
It is
Like,
tough. There needs to be
it's tough. We need to have like a real populist grassroots movement, and I don't think like you can't fix a system by fighting it. Like truly change something, build a new model that makes the existing one obsolete, and that new model is, in my opinion, like an independent Canada.
I think it's
And
republicanism.
and
That's what I think.
learning and being under the tutelage of our greatest partner, America,
Yeah,
and potentially adopting the U.S. Constitution and understanding like the rights that imbues upon the people, because Canada's lost a lot of its rights. We're living
100%.
it's wild out there. So
Well,
this is
just before you go, because it's funny
yeah, I
that
gotta go.
yeah, I know, and we're over the time that you allotted, and I do appreciate you sticking around here. But I just wanted to bring this up because you had just brought it up now, and there is a start, at least. How do you feel about Canada becoming a constitutional republic? I mean, that's what you're basically just
I think
saying,
that's great.
right? That would be something great.
We need a declaration of independence. We need to, and there could also be the balkanization of Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually started a Canadian Republican Party here under that exact guise. So to touch on trying to change the system on the outside and not actually just attacking it, there is we got 19 signed right now. I got 70 that are out for signing, but they're full
What
on.
does that mean?
You, in order to become a registered federal party, you have to get these signed. You got to get 250 of these signed, at least. So
Okay.
in order to get recognized and then actually have anything become implemented. Now, is this something that's going to actually occur within any reasonable amount of time? Probably not.
Well,
Right?
it depends. I mean, like, look, there's a lot of concerned Americans right now, and some concerned Canadians in America, and a lot of concerned Canadians in Canada that if they were just made aware of this, whether this is. But look, okay, very interesting.
Right. So I'm collaborating with some. I mean, I wrote this myself, but I'm collaborating with some big accounts on X, like Government EXT and Christie and all these types of folks. But yeah, I mean, the idea behind it is to abandon the monarchy, Westminster system of government, and establish a constitutional republic within Canada. So I don't want it to all be negative here with you, Ka.
No, this is a good thing to focus on. Like, make this go viral.
This is where we get, right?
Get signers on this, and hit the streets with this paper and record interactions with people, and like get some primary footage. The content is key,
Yeah.
and like long form interview content is not key. Short form content that shows that runs counter to this notion that Justin will say there's no way in hell that Canada's ever becoming a 51st state, or like even Pierre and all these other guys. It's like, nah, it's like we don't know what the future is, and what kind of timelines are we talking about? Like, is Canada still going to be a Westminster system of government in 1,000 years? Fuck no.
Lord, I hope not.
No, there's
And
no
the fucking
way.
meteor.
No way. There's no
Yeah.
way. There's no way that it'll survive that long. Like, to think,
No.
is it will survive 50 years? Like maybe, but I would say very unlikely. And there's a good chance like it could like, if the right amount of energy goes in towards inspiring and opening up a container for discourse and debate amongst all Canadians. If we activate the free press in Canada again, we get people talking in parlor halls about, you know, what do we want of Canada? Like, what are the values? Is it the flag? Is it the flag that is so important? Because if it's the flag, we can keep the flag. Like, don't worry, we can keep the flag. Is it the king? Is it the monarchy? Is it the parliamentary system? Is it the ridings? Like, I don't, I think if you actually were to engage in an open, honest discussion about this, you know, we can have a very fruitful outcome, and you can start spawning, like, you know, that sentiment towards having like the Canadian Revolution, the Independence Revolution, away from this system. So go make the content. Like, get out there, keep doing what you're doing, brother. Appreciate you, Spencer. I'm gonna jet now.
Yeah, Kyle, I appreciate you.
Bro,
You rock, man. I really do. I do think you're great, and yeah, I do appreciate your time. You have a great day.
all right, you as well. Bye for now.
Goodbye.